Walt, the other day, I put on The Clash, the song London's Calling's coming on. So what do we do when I do field work? We buy a ticket. In this case, I went across the pond. I'm here in London. I'm not broadcasting from 221B Baker Street, the fictional home of Sherlock Holmes, but I'm here in London. I met with Wayve. I met with institutional investors, learning a lot about the autonomy economy in Europe. While I'm here in Europe, the baseball playoffs are underway back home. I hope you're following it. Unsure, I know you're an Eagles fan, but I know what you're following in the autonomy markets. And this week, Tesla, once again, unfortunately, they're facing pressure on the regulatory front. Zoox is hiring lobbyists, and they're out there lobbying to get their exemptions. Baidu, in working with Dubai, they want to become the autonomy capital. Well, I'm here in London meeting with folks. What else is happening in the autonomy markets this week?
Well, before we get to that, Grayson, I think what our listeners really would like to know is how many London taxis that you've taken. And then when you've gotten into one of these London taxis, which in many ways approximates Zoox, which, as our longtime listeners know, is something you've criticized. Does it bring back Zoox memory? And has it changed your opinion on these boxier vehicles that you can sit in where you're facing your fellow passengers?
Do you want to know a little bit of a secret, Walt?
Yes, I would like to know.
The answer, 0. I have not been in one black cab.
How's that possible? I mean, how did you get from the airport into London?
Well, you got no idea. Now, this is a story. And I will paraphrase this with saying, my wife watches too many mafia movies. So we landed Heathrow in the morning, and the driver meets us to go take us to our car. Big explosion. I said, holy shit, what's going on? Next thing you know, Walt, there's smoke coming out of the parking garage. And the driver finds out where it is, and he says, sir, my car was right there. And my wife goes, they were trying to whack you. I said, Jesus Christmas, you're watching the wrong movies. So we had to take the Heathrow Express because the car we were going in nearly got bombed out. And to Dan Goff, I had that conversation with you. Yes, my wife watches too many mafia movies. So, well, it's been interesting. So we hopped on the Heathrow Express, and then I had a car service pick us up at Paddington Station, where I'm traveling with my daughter. So what do you do at Paddington Station? You buy a Paddington Bear. So it's been a London experience.
I would like to know, when this happened and your wife was commenting about, maybe someone was trying to get you, what first crossed your mind? Was it going to be a Tesla bull that was going to go after you, or a Waymo bull? Where did it first cross your mind? Which side of the aisle was going to try and get you in your trip to London?
Neither. I thought it might have been a foreign spy, but a lot of things went through my head.
What? Okay, I don't know how you get there. Let's move on to actual autonomy. And why don't you tell us a little bit more about Wayve and what your experience was in meeting with Wayve? And I guess did you try one of their cars?
I did try one of the cars. I did meet with Wayve. I saw the engineering. There's a lot for us to dissect and break down with Wayve. And I want to summarize it this way. I was fully impressed. I went on a 45-minute drive. Yes, there was a safety driver. There was no safety engineer, but safety driver on the left-hand side of the road. It was one of the best AV ride experience I've ever had. And before we get the comments, I will be releasing the full 45-minute unedited video for the public to see in the coming weeks. I was thoroughly impressed.
So tell us more about the vehicle and the type of sensor stack that they had, and anything you can on the technology side first.
So it was running the Orin NVIDIA chip, the one that you saw in a video that Jensen signed. The compute, interesting divergence from when we met with WeRide. This is air-cooled compute, not water-cooled compute. The compute and all the stuff that goes in the vehicle, very small. If I'll use the English term, because I'm here in England, Walt, it fits in the boot. There is no compute in the front. There's no compute under the seats. A very small compute. The vehicle is running 12 cameras, 1 radar, and drum roll please, no LiDAR. That's right, no LiDAR.
Did you have any lengthy discussion with them about kind of this debate? Like, is it as big a debate in Europe as it is in the US? And kind of what is their view there in general?
And thank you for bringing that up, because we had that discussion. And Tilly and the team at Wayve and everybody there, thanks for listening to the episode, because when you and I broke down the Wayve Nissan Pro Pilot, I had to bring that up and we discussed it. The way that the Wayve technology works, and this is really impressive, it's something that you and I are going to have to just discuss more in depth, is the Wayve technology is adaptable. The reason Nissan has all the sensors, including the LiDAR sensor, that was a request from Nissan. That was not a Wayve technical demand or a Wayve technical need. That was simply the request of Nissan. The Wayve technology can work with a radar, with a LiDAR, without a radar, without a LiDAR. It's a vision-based system, but it can put these adaptations on based on the needs and wants of the OEM and their partners.
I mean, we saw the challenges that Aurora faced with their OEM partner. In that case, it was PACCAR, in terms of just taking a driver out of the driver's seat. Do you think or anticipate that Wayve will have similar issues? Because as we know, the Wayve business model is to partner with OEMs, right? They want to go to I think, ultimately private ownership, right? That's the model. Are they going to face that with other OEMs where the OEMs, to make themselves feel better, are going to require that LiDAR be included in the sensor stack?
I would say that Alex Kendall, their co-founder and CEO, has diligently thought this out. I will say, without speaking for Mr. Kendall or the Wayve team, and saying that based on my conversations, they have a clear understanding of the market. The management team has a clear understanding of the politics that go along with these deals. And I will say that they are very well prepared for what potentially could arise from potential OEM partnerships.
So that basically means that if OEM, so that was your political way of saying, I think, that if the OEMs would like to require the LiDAR, they can toss that in there. And it's not like this Tesla thing where Elon has claimed, and that team has claimed that, adding LiDAR as an additional sensor actually confuses the system. They don't. So I think if I'm trying to translate what you're saying, and I shouldn't have to do that, Grayson, just speak directly. That's what Autonomy Markets is about. They'll put it in if the OEM wants it, but it's not one of these things where if they put it in, it screws up their entire system.
That is correct. The sensor suite from the design, the Wayve engineering team works with the OEM's engineering team. So I want to say that very clearly. From a sensor requirement standpoint, that is the requirements come from the OEM, not Wayve. And you are correct, and I should be more blunt about this. The Wayve system can work with LiDAR, it can work with radar without confusing the system. So yes, you are correct.
So, I mean, look, many people have challenged Tesla's reason for that. Like, you go back to the earlier days at Tesla when Elon would say, it's a cost issue, clearly not a cost issue anymore, given how third-party pricing has come down over the years. Here's a company that can actually do both. Fine. Again, challenging maybe Tesla's narrative. But again, on the third, I guess my third part of this is this is the OEMs requiring it because that narrative is a global narrative, meaning that, you'd rather have better safe than sorry, right? Include the LiDAR in there. But if it was ultimately Wayve's decision to make, would they have a preference to do it with or without LiDAR? Can you even answer that question?
I can't speak for Wayve, but I can tell you what I experienced. And I've never experienced this before, what I experienced in the car. And I'm going to ask you if you ever experienced this as a human driver. Have you ever experienced a double roundabout?
I don't even know what that means. What do you mean a double roundabout? Like you come out, I know what a roundabout is, but what is a double roundabout?
So they're stacked. They're one on top of each other. So cars are coming in from all these different directions with a double roundabout. You go into one, you immediately have to go into the other.
No, I've never heard of that. Yeah.
It's one of the most complicated, in my opinion, driving scenarios. And the Wayve driver on the left-hand side of the road handled it flawlessly with a camera. Another scenario which I've noticed, which is very important, which will be in the video, which we will be releasing, is in this part of London that we were in, over by the British Museum, it's a cars on both sides of the road, and then there's a little traffic slowing where it comes together, and it says on our side, you have the right of way. So this driver, and I'm going to use the UK term here for you, Walt, and a lorry decides to floor it. The Wayve driver, this is in autonomous mode, slow down and let the driver go, even though we had the right of way. And that was in one scenario. In another one, there was a mother with a baby in a carriage, and the vehicle could not tell if the mother was going to try and illegally cross the road, if the mother might lose control of the carriage. And the vehicle automatically verged to the right to avoid it and give it space in case the mother did lose control. Those are three actually very interesting experiences that I saw firsthand with the Wayve driver, and that was a camera-based system.
So those were great anecdotes, but I feel like I'm talking to a politician now that's trying to avoid the question. So I'm going to pin you down again. I know you've done that to me in past episodes. My question is this, like based on your discussions with them, do you sense that they have a preference? I mean, obviously they're going to work with however the OEMs, and they have great respect for their OEMs, and it's all about generating business. So, provide what the customer wants. Unlike Tesla, which is like, hey, if you want to do it, here's our stack. Good luck. Do they have a preference though? Obviously the car you were in didn't have LiDAR. And as you pointed out, there are some of their OEMs will want to have LiDAR. What is their preference as the actual technology experts in this situation?
I was asked to give advice to the Prime Minister today on autonomous vehicles, so I'm in a political mood, and I'm going to give you another political answer.
Okay, so you're not going to answer. Let me try another thing. What do you think the UK or Europe in general is going to require? This is a two-part question, by the way. Is the UK going to require them to put LiDAR or any of these other European markets where they're targeting with their OEMs, first off? And secondly, did you happen to talk about what their partner Uber said when Dara, was talking about the need for LiDAR?
As it relates to the regulatory environment, the UK, I'll say point blank, no, I do not see the UK requiring LiDAR. The EU, and I have met with the individuals in the EU that are drafting the autonomous vehicle regulations, so full disclosure there, unsure. I can tell you based on the preliminary draft of EU regulations, I am concerned with some of the overreaching requirements that are in there. So potentially in the EU, but I would say no to the UK.
Okay. In telco land, they forced GSM, the Europeans. In the U.S., obviously, you could pick whatever technology you want. They didn't license spectrum based on the technology. So we'll see how that plays out. Clearly, in my opinion, the better solution is you let technology people do technology. And when I was in D.C. this week, I learned myself about what's happening in telco and how NVIDIA, can put GPUs directly into radios, which will reduce a lot of the legacy stack that's out there. And it sounds crazy, and it impacts legacy providers potentially, massive reduction in cost. But, clearly these governments, wherever they are, should let technology flourish and let new approaches exist. And we'll see if they work or no. And if they don't, fine. Then those that have the better technology approach, if that includes LiDAR or not, will be successful. Is there anything else you want to add in terms of Wayve, or should we move on to other meetings that you had in the UK?
I'll say this wholeheartedly. Wayve is a special company, and there's big things coming. And I was beyond impressed with what I experienced. And Walt, don't you worry. I got you an invitation, and they can't wait to see you too.
I can't wait. But my second part of the question, did you talk about what Dara said about LiDAR? Did that come up in any of your conversations?
I will not comment on that directly.
So if there's nothing else to talk about in terms of Wayve, let's, pun intended, move on to what you learned about Moove. And maybe first give us a little bit of background on who Moove is and, anything interesting that you learned in your meetings with them.
Moove is a fleet management company that has partnerships with both Uber and Waymo that are looking, and I'll use the term the Hollywood line, to own the below the line to manage all the fleet services for autonomous vehicles, aka robotaxis. And there was a Bloomberg report about a month ago that Moove is looking to own the Waymo assets on their balance sheet by raising $1 billion US. Based on the meetings that I've had here in the UK, I am unsure if that report is true to the extent it is true. So a lot of us couldn't get a definitive answer. I know you want a better answer, but I'm telling you, I could not get a definitive answer. But I have reason to doubt that Bloomberg article, and if that is truly going to come to fruition, and if it is going to come to fruition at the dollar amount that was publicly reported.
And then just in general, we talk a lot on this podcast about the importance of what they do. Anything, that you got from them in terms of the challenges of getting power and whether the market's going to be fragmented. Do they look at this being a long-term roll-up? Like, what are their overall thoughts on the U.S. market? Obviously, they're a global company, but in the U.S. market specifically.
I will say point blank, energy is top of mind. It is top of mind, and I want to expand that. And meeting with several institutional investors today, the topic of energy is coming up more and more. And to some of those investors that listen to Autonomy Markets, the Road to Autonomy, thank you. But the institutions are really starting to ask the questions that we discuss here in Autonomy Markets. Energy, real estate, and this came up today, which was the first time I've heard in a long time. What is the depreciation value of an autonomous vehicle? And what do you do with end of life? Can you make any money from salvage? So institutions are starting to look at a bigger picture, and the conversation is just not around the technology anymore, where fleet management is becoming very, very compelling. And did meet with some institutional investors that watched our video from Austin and was asking all about the depot. So very, very interesting that attention is turning its way to the below the line, the fleet management, and the services side of autonomy.
On the residual value thing, it really goes back to a lot of the discussions we had with Nuro, where Nuro is convinced that you want to move away from the purpose-designed vehicle and partner with OEMs because of that ability to finance and have residual value. I'm just not sure that I agree with that long term, because at the end of the day, when I plug our models together and trying to figure out mix of miles on autonomous fleets in terms of robotaxi fleets, I think they're going to run these things into the ground and put hundreds of thousands of miles on them. And, the residual value will effectively be parts, right? I mean, I had a car for 10 or 12 years and got a couple $1,000s for something I paid, I think like 60 or 70 for. Like, I just don't know if that's a major input to what people should be thinking about in terms of how this all works. And frankly, if you can drive down the cost of the vehicle, strip out all the bells and whistles that get put into what you would want in a privately owned car in something that's a robotaxi, and make it a lot cheaper, and be able to do this, as we've talked about many times before, with Foxconn or any of the number of contract manufacturers that are out there. I don't know. I don't necessarily buy into that model completely, but we'll see. As always, I'll keep my mind open.
I want to stay on the theme because I had a conversation with a friend of mine who covers the public markets, and he started asking all these questions about scrapyards and how scrapyards can make money from this. So there's a lot of interesting dialogue that wasn't happening 6 months ago.
Look, the autonomy, which is the physical manifestation of AI, is going to change the economy in so many different ways. Yeah, there's going to be something down at scrapyards. I don't think we're going to ever get to that point, Grayson. I know it's great, and someone might be excited about it, but I think I'm going to leave scrapyards out of my interest list in terms of how autonomy is changing the market. There's a lot more interesting things that we're gonna deal with. Is there anything else that we need to cover in London, or can we move back across the pond and talk about what's going on in the U.S.?
We can move back across the pond, but I want to leave this for the audience. The UK is going to be a very, very important autonomous vehicle market, and so put it on your watch list and pay attention to it.
I'm going to push back on that. Like, why? Because Wayve's there? Because at the end of the day, the population is not that high. We're seeing what's happening with politics in general in that country. So, like, other than being the home of Wayve, which we have great obvious respect for, why should I care about the UK?
There is an opportunity based on transport data to deploy 120,000 robotaxis in London, not City of London, but London proper. That is the registered number today of Ubers under license from the transport ministry.
That's great, Grayson, but there's 60 or 70 million people that live there overall. Great beer, Liverpool, top of the table. I don't know if they're a swing factor in what happens globally, but let's go back to the US, the most important market in the world. And New York, the best city in the world. Back on the East Coast in general, you have Waymo extending its permit to keep testing in New York City through the end of the year. And like I just said, New York City is the ultimate city, the best city. Density, aggressive drivers, potholes the size of a Mini Cooper. As you know what they say, if you can survive here as an autonomous company, you've got bragging rights pretty much anywhere. And on the other side, our buddies over at Zoox are announcing Washington, D.C. as the next city, which is not really about the tough traffic patterns. I was just there, not really that complex of a city, but clearly more about the optics. So what's better a way to normalize your robotaxi than driving senators and regulators, around their offices, right? So that is a positive, I think, for the industry in general. So, what were you, obviously you haven't been following the U.S. news as closely, What got you more excited? Having some more New York City, and obviously we have an election coming up here in a month or so, which could really dramatically change things. But what was more interesting to you, Waymo in New York or Zoox announcing DC as its next city?
The most interesting thing to me is none of those. You're Walt Sinatra now. If you can make it there, you can make it anywhere. We got Walt Sinatra here. Waymo extending to the end of the year is a very good thing. It is a very good movement for the industry. It is not a catalyst, I want to stress, because as I've been following the news, and I love my beloved New York Post. They got the best sports page in town. Adams dropped out. If you look at the polling data is showing an incoming mayor, Mandami, who is against this form of technology. So that could be a potential risk. Maybe Waymo's just trying to front load what's going on. And Zoox going to DC, very smart move, but not commercial testing. I read the press release. It was testing, not commercialization. 2 positive steps, but nothing to look for at this point as a catalyst.
I mean, the Mandami stuff, I feel you on that. But as you know well, like there's other infrastructure issues that need to be dealt with in order to get a robotaxi fleet to work in New York. If Mandami wants to set the city back, if he even has the power to do that, that's on him and whatever, These things pass as they did in San Francisco. But in terms of Zoox, let's tie this into another political thing that's happening right now back home, where we've had a shutdown, right? So I'm going to list off some things I think that get impacted by the shutdown. You might correct me on some of them, but NHTSA crash investigations I think would be paused, right? So that's a big one. You're shaking your head no, but you can. Why don't we go one by one? NHTSA crash investigations paused. So what happens at NHTSA during this shutdown?
Based on the publicly available Department of Transportation shutdown funding documents, the 574 employees at NHTSA, there is no furloughs. As it relates to their work and to their investigations of working with counter agencies and other individuals, I'm unsure how that will work, but as based on the DOT funding, NHTSA continues full steam ahead, but I do not have any insight to how that might impact investigations and or potential investigation.
I mean, I think there's other stuff like, the DOT AV testing, FAA drone, like approvals, things like that. I mean, these shutdowns typically don't last that long. So I think we should kind of skip over this, not spend too much time and see how long it ends up being. I mean, there is, Congress does kind of move on. I think, in my world, FCC Chairman Carr is going to have to, sit in front of a bunch of senators. They're going to grill him. In that world of politics, you have 2 Democratic senators, Ed Markey and Rich Blumenthal, I think Markey's Massachusetts, Blumenthal's Connecticut, sent a letter to NHTSA demanding tighter oversight, pointing specifically at the FSD's behavior. I think they were referring back to a lot of these videos of the Teslas not handling basically the train barriers that were coming down. Interesting, obviously, that it comes from 2 Democrats. This is a couple of weeks after Elon and Trump were at the Charlie Kirk Memorial together, obviously, seemingly in pretty good spirits. Are we back to kind of politics as usual? We're going to have the Dems going after Tesla. And frankly, since they're not in charge, other than calling for it, is anything you think going to happen at NHTSA in terms of them calling for additional investigations?
What's old again is new again. This is not the first time Senator Blumenthal has called for an investigation into NHTSA. This has happened on multiple occasions. I am not going to foresight why. All I can say, and this has been publicly documented and debunked, the time that Senator Blumenthal went for a ride with FSD supervised on, it was on a controlled course, and certain things happened in the testing, and I will not say who did it for privacy purposes, but there's a long history of Senator Blumenthal going after Tesla and trying to push forward investigations. So what's old again is new again, and it's unfortunate, and not giving political advice, but in my humble opinion, if Senator Blumenthal wants these investigations, Senator Blumenthal should go to Austin and take a ride in robotaxi and experience how good this technology truly is.
I mean, you're assuming that politicians on either side, left, right, or center, or up, down, whatever direction you want to say, care about the actual facts as opposed to, playing to whatever political base that they have out there. So I've kind of lost a bit of faith in that. It's been again, spent a lot of time in DC, was just there again this past week. So, and the reality is like them, sending these letters, does that really, everyone's mind is, I think, seemingly already made up. So in the meantime, Tesla's hopefully moving forward. I still didn't get my software update to 14 FSD yet. As they keep out to pushing the technology forward, and people will just have to decide for themselves as they get exposed to this technology, and we see how it performs. In robotaxi world, or hopping into a car of a friend of yours like me that has FSD and then uses it every time that I drive.
Yeah, it's a shame. It's politics at its finest is how I would describe it. And I said this last week, and I got some, I would say this politely, Walt, some heated feedback about the phone. And I still believe the phone causes more crashes, more accidents, more incidents than FSD. And I would love people to continue to challenge me on that because I'm not going to stop on that. It's a very good system. Is it the greatest system in the world? No. Is it a very good system? Yes. Is it going to save lives? Yes.
Yeah, I think we're in agreement there. One other thing in the U.S., again, focus of this podcast, New York City, greatest city in the world, home of the New York Stock Exchange and the NASDAQ, where Kodiak was last week with their truck. Today, we've got a 16% pop in the stock. There was some disclosures of some respected institutional investors that own Kodiak. It frankly shouldn't have been a surprise. I think it should have been, if anyone had done their homework, it was known that it should have been known that these investors were in it. But, I think, it's good to get, the market is used as a way to get some exposure. And I think this is good for the space. So, congrats, I guess, is what you would say to Kodiak for seeing this pop in the stock. We'll see if it continues. Obviously, one day pops can disappear the following day, depend on any number of things.
Good for Kodiak. I think it's an indication that there is institutional interest in the area. And I want to state for the record, there was a photo that went around last week when I was in the States that 2 Kodiak autonomous trucks got into a crash. False news, fake news. Atlas Energy put out a long, lengthy blog post explaining what happened. So fake news on that. It just seems that anytime there's a potential incident or perception of an incident, everybody runs out there for to make the autonomy the boogeyman. But then there's that great Warren Buffett line. There's a great Howard Marks line on it as well, that the stock market's a voting machine, and clearly the market is voting at Kodiak, and stocks go up, stocks go down, markets go up, markets go down. But it's a positive indicator that institutions are opening up this technology, and that's something that I'm seeing right here when I'm in London.
I mean, it's a voting machine for one day, so I wouldn't, put the cart before the horse. But yeah, it's always positive if you get some attention as a result. I mean, the other stock that's up today is Mobileye. Mobileye was at an investor conference yesterday, I think, giving what I would call a more pragmatic message relative to the stuff that we love to talk about here, talking about L2 plus and ADAS, not in robotaxis. Obviously, that's very different than kind of the world of NVIDIA, talking end-to-end AV and robotaxis, and Mobileye focusing on, which I think what you have appreciated historically, revenue now, products now. Like what are they doing now? Like, because here's a company that's generating $2 billion of revenue already, which is primarily ADAS. It's not really, the future of autonomy. So, any new thoughts on Mobileye? And again, we've talked about this before in this podcast. Like maybe that is a pattern, or a process where, hey, you do L2 first, and that is the next step to autonomy. Or are you of the belief that no, you got to go full force to full autonomy from day one and not even bother with these interim steps?
I'll say this: over the last probably 4 months of meeting and speaking with institutional investors, the name Mobileye has not come up once. And the news that you're sharing with me now as we speak, I'm going to give you a pushback question. Is Mobileye reading the market and saying that our true opportunity is in ADAS, since global OEMs around the world are embracing ADAS, and we're seeing that exactly what's happening with Honda and Helm AI. Is this a potential Mobileye sees that, hey, listen, we got to really go for this L2 market since that's where the market believes that our technology serves best? And I'm going to say this bluntly, Walt, punt on Robotaxi, at least for now?
Definitely not. I mean, I think because there was also the message about, taking the driver out in mid 2026 with the VW Buzz program, talking about whatever, 12,000 units over 4 or 5 years. It's a more methodical approach. So I don't think it's an either or. It's just how they're progressing. Just like you could argue that in the world of trucking, Kodiak saying like, okay, we'll start by putting our sensors on. If at some point in the future an OEM wants to move with us with greater integration, sure, we can go that route. But we wanted to get the revenue today and not have to deal with the slow-moving OEMs. So I think maybe you could draw parallels between those two approaches. And frankly, just because investors aren't asking about a company doesn't mean that's not a great opportunity. If anything, those are the things you want to look for, like companies that are progressing, that investors have fallen asleep on, because that might be something of greater interest. Again, I'm not saying one way or another. Haven't done enough work on Mobileye to know whether this tech stack is out there, but there's always multiple ways to look at individual companies.
It's interesting that you said driver out VW ID bus mid 2026. Did Mobileye give any insight or clarity if that will be a part of the Uber partnership? I asked that because in the original Uber press release for the ID4s that are running on the Uber network in Los Angeles in 2027, they will originally start driver in with a safety engineer and a safety driver. Any clarity that Mobileye offered us on that?
I think it's mid 26. You're going to have Florida small scale driver out deployment, late 26 commercial launch with Uber in Los Angeles. And then after you have Uber in LA, you have Lyft in Dallas with Marubeni. No specific timing there. So maybe you're probably talking 27. And then when you get into 27, you're also talking about European city launches like Hamburg, Berlin, Munich, Oslo, things like that. So I think that, there is a roadmap. So we'll see.
Interesting. I wish them well. I think this is interesting into the Mobileye and VW folks. Walt and I would love to take a ride. I know we've asked before, and you said you're not letting outside parties in, but based on this news, we'd love to take a ride. And being based in Florida, I'd love to learn what your Florida's deployments are because the regulatory environment's there. So perhaps we have a new company to watch.
I mean, we have been watching this. We need to spend more time with them. I'm actually, I'm scheduled to spend more time with them next week. So, I think Mobileye is definitely on the radar, as it should be, right? I mean, obviously they're a primary player in the space, but as they progress on this timeline, we'll spend a little bit more time there. Meanwhile, our friends at Hyundai, let's just yank that into it because there was a little bit of news today. Obviously, on September 30th, the incentives went away for EV cars. And, I think you had two approaches. Tesla, I think, removed some of the incentives in terms of the financing for some of these things. And Hyundai, I think, lowered price by the amount of credits that they were getting, wanting to sell more of these Ioniq 5s. So, we're watching Hyundai because they are an important partner for WeRide, but more importantly for Waymo, and wanting to get down that path. If anything, if you're cutting price in the U.S. to offset the lack of EV incentives that are out there, there should be more pressure on that company internally to deliver on those Waymo product lines to ramp up volume in this country. So I think ultimately what we care about is autonomy. Maybe this lack of incentive for EVs is going to help us to put more pressure on OEMs like this to try and deliver products to Waymo and WeRide, which is what we want to see in this country. I mean the U.S., not U.K., as soon as possible.
Yes, I think what you and I, which I'll be watching, and I'll share it here on Autonomy Markets, I'll be watching the Cox Automotive and Experian data from the next 2 quarters to see what EV sales are. When we get the next round of data, I believe we're going to see a major pull-through of individuals that wanted to get before the tax break went away. Now that has expired, I'm going to watch the next 2 quarters to see what that impact is. And you're right. They have customers with the ability to finance and the ability to pay cash for these vehicles, and then hopefully they can accelerate some of those autonomy sales if EV sales, which I will predict here, are going to decline in the United States.
Grayson, now that you spent a little time in London, I'm wondering if this gives you any kind of, incentive or desire to go to Dubai. Because in Dubai, you've had some news this week. You got Baidu, who won some permits to launch the Apollo Go robotaxis. They want to go fully driverless in early 2026. And then, last week you had Tensor unveiling the robocar, the thing that I actually saw in New York. Not a fleet, but a level 4 car that you can actually own, private ownership. So a bit different than what Baidu's, is proposing. But, Dubai, why pick this market in terms of, this focus, or is it just coincidental? But it seems like there's focus there.
Regulatory environment. You have regulatory environment. You have a growing tourism brand, and not just Dubai, but the whole UAE. If you go look at Abu Dhabi, they have some of the finest art there. So you're getting not just we want to go have fun in the sand. We want to go, and yes, you can drink in certain environments and hotels there. We want to go drink and we want to go party. You're starting to get a culture. And if you look at the moves that are being made in Riyadh and in Saudi Arabia, trying to get more tourism, and I believe that incorporating autonomy into your countries or to your emirates or your kingdoms, into your emirates plans is a very positive thing. And actually, I have been in discussions to go over to the UAE to test these things. So we'll see when that happens. And to the folks, you know who you are. I got Walt. He's got to come with me, and we're going to bring Autonomy Markets to the UAE because I want to experience the technology firsthand with you, Walt.
We'll say. I just figured being in London might have inspired you maybe to consider going to the UAE. But getting back to Dubai, I mean, that's a government that I believe is targeting 25% of trips to be autonomous by 2030. I mean, that's actually, I think that should be an easy lift because some of the work that I've done in the US would suggest that traffic can be much higher than that. Again, assuming you can get these OEMs to ramp their volume and make sure the regulatory is kind of on track. So, 25% doesn't seem like a hard target to hit. What are your thoughts on that?
From a regulatory standpoint, from a demand standpoint, yes, you can. And I want to stay on the Emirates news. Well, we had big news, and we had big news this week, at least according to me and you and the Autonomy Markets audience, out of Abu Dhabi this week. It happened. Andrew McDonald, you did it. I love it. I thank you. Please release date on it. Walt, the WeRide in Abu Dhabi has an autonomous vehicle tier inside of the Uber app. That's right, there's an autonomous vehicle tier inside of the Uber app to get a WeRide in Abu Dhabi now. That's a positive sign.
That is a positive sign. Let's bring it back to the U.S. and allow us to do that in some of these markets. I have a friend that's in Austin right now, and I'm trying to convince him to try and get a Waymo. If you can do it there, if you can do it in Abu Dhabi or whatever you're saying, then you should be able to do it in the U.S. I guess Uber in that market feels good enough about WeRide, providing whatever, enough rides fast enough. I find that I'm a little skeptical about that, given the work I've done on WeRide. I don't know. Maybe it was a local requirement that we wouldn't have in this country. I don't know.
Instead of calling the autonomous vehicle tab, Uber can call it the We Autonomous app.
Oh, that's a bad joke.
Well, you know what? It's a dad joke. How's that?
All right, Grayson. Well, that's it for this week. You're normally the one asking me, what do we have on tap for next week? So now I'm going to ask you, what do we have on tap for next week in terms of what to look for in the world of autonomy markets?
Well, thanks for being the band leader this week. You made me very proud. Now I'll give you the name Tommy Dorsey. He's a great big band. You did a great job hosting the big autonomy markets. What we're waiting for next week, you and I know, FSD 14. I keep checking my phone from London. It said update available. Okay, great. I did a minor update to my phone, and then I get the data report, 10.2 gigs of data transferred to my Tesla. I was like, oh, that seems a lot more than a minor update. So maybe that's an inclination something's coming. What's on deck next week is hopefully FSD 14. We test it. We host another great show. I'm back in the States. Until then, the future's bright. The future's autonomous. The future is autonomy markets. Well, until next week.